I opened the family group chat that morning expecting the usual little things, a photo of my granddaughter's art project, or maybe a message about Sunday dinner. Instead, I saw a single line that made my heart stop. Block her. She's not one of us anymore. For a moment, I thought I was in the wrong conversation. My thumb froze above the screen. The words didn't make sense. Then I noticed the profile picture beside the message, Jasmine. My daughter-in-law. And just beneath it, a small red heart reaction from my son, Eric. Then I saw the title at the top, Scott Family, New. My stomach dropped, because my family chat didn't say new. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just stared as the screen filled with more messages, all from people who once sat around my kitchen table, laughing and passing plates of food I cooked with my own hands. Once we get the house sorted, this will be easier. She won't fight. She's too tired. We need her out before summer. Don't tell her anything. She's already confused. Each message felt like someone tightening a rope around my chest. It wasn't the words alone, it was the casual tone. Like they were talking about an old piece of furniture they needed to move, not a woman who raised one of them and welcomed the other into her family. And then it hit me, this wasn't the group chat Eric had added me to. This was a screenshot. Someone had forwarded it to me privately. Their real family chat, the one I wasn't in anymore. I sat there on my couch, the house quiet except for the ticking clock on the wall. My tea had gone cold. Outside, a few birds chirped like it was any other gentle morning. But something inside me shifted, something deep and painful. Like the floor of my life had quietly cracked open. I looked across the room at my husband Robert's old chair. The cushion still had the faint dip of his shape, even though he'd been gone for almost a year. That chair had held us through every storm we faced together. And I whispered to the empty room, not one of us anymore. I should have been angry, but the first feeling that washed over me was disbelief. After everything I had given, everything I had sacrificed, how had I become the outsider? If you want to understand how my own family came to speak about me like I was a burden, or a problem, we have to go back to the day they buried my husband. Because that was the day they started burying me, too. Before we go on, tell me where you're listening from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories coming soon. The day we buried my husband, Robert, the sky hung low and gray, almost as if it didn't want to let go of him either. I remember standing by the grave, gripping the folded flag and trying to keep my hands from shaking. People whispered condolences, hugged me, patted my back, but everything sounded muffled, like my ears were full of cotton. Eric stood beside me in a crisp black suit. My son looked older than his 30-something years, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the casket. When it was his turn to speak, he cleared his throat and said all the right things. He talked about how much he loved his father. How he would take care of Mom now. How Robert's legacy, especially the house, would stay in the family forever. His voice trembled at that part, and for a moment, I believed he meant it. After the service, when most people had left, I stayed behind. I touched the top of the casket gently. My fingers traced the grain of the wood, the same way they used to trace the lines on Robert's hand when we sat on the porch swing. A memory slipped in, quiet and warm. Months before he passed, Robert had taken my hand and said, "As long as my paperwork is right, you'll never be without a roof over your head." He said it with that steady confidence I relied on, the kind that made me feel safe in a world that didn't always make sense. I whispered that promise back to him before I left the cemetery. I didn't know then how quickly others would try to break it. A week after the funeral, when the casseroles stopped coming and the phone stopped ringing, Eric told me he had a surprise to help me feel less alone. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through thank you cards, when my phone buzzed with a new notification. A group chat. The name at the top read, Scott Family. I didn't know then how easily names can stay the same while people are quietly removed. Eric added me with a cheerful message, so we can all stay connected. For a moment, the little digital heart felt like a lifeline. Inside the chat were photos of Hannah making silly faces at school, and short videos of Tyler showing off the Lego set I had bought him months earlier. Jasmine sent a few pictures too, perfectly staged shots of their family dinners and fresh starts. I typed back slowly, still learning how to manage my trembling fingers. Thank you. This means a lot. But as I scrolled, something tugged at my attention. The group photo was a picture of the four of them, Eric, Jasmine, Hannah, and Tyler, standing in my living room after the funeral. I was there that day, sitting on the couch just a few feet away. But in this photo, they had cropped the frame so tightly that you couldn't see me at all. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself they probably picked the picture because everyone looked nice. Because the lighting was good. Because people don't think about these things. But a small, uneasy feeling slid into my stomach, the way cold water seeps into cracks you didn't know were there. It was such a small thing, just a photo. But sometimes the smallest things are the first signs of something shifting underneath your feet. It was a quiet Thursday evening when Eric and Jasmine showed up unannounced. I remember because I had just taken a pot of stew off the stove, and the whole kitchen smelled like thyme and onions. They stepped inside with a certain briskness, not even pausing to hang up their coats. Eric carried a manila folder under his arm. "Mom, we need to go over a few things," he said, already pulling out the chairs at the table. Jasmine hovered behind him, her smile tight and shiny, like something stretched too far. My stomach tightened. I wasn't used to them arriving like this, with papers and urgency. Usually it was the kids running in first or Jasmine asking for a recipe. But Eric spread the documents out as if we were in some kind of meeting. Since Dad didn't get everything sorted before he passed, he began, "There's some housekeeping we need to finish." "Nothing major." Jasmine chimed in, tapping a page with her manicured finger. "This will help streamline things. Just signatures. Standard stuff." I looked at the forms, long paragraphs, tiny print, words like refinance, consolidation, joint responsibility. My vision blurred for a moment. Grief has a way of fogging your mind. It makes the simplest decisions feel like puzzles. "I don't understand all this," I admitted softly. Eric gave a sympathetic sigh, the kind that sounds patient but feels dismissive. "Mom, it's okay. I've already reviewed everything. This will protect you. It's easier if we handle it together." I wanted to believe him. He was my son. And I was tired in a way that went past my bones. So I signed. I didn't ask enough questions. And they didn't offer any answers. I didn't know it then, but my signature that night opened the first door they would later try to push me out of. A few weeks after signing those papers, Eric and Jasmine came over for dinner. I wanted to make something comforting, something that reminded me of quieter times, so I put on a pot of chicken and rice, the kind Robert used to ask for on cold nights. But when they walked in, Jasmine wrinkled her nose lightly and said, "Oh. I actually ordered takeout. Something quick." Her voice was polite, but the message was clear, my cooking wasn't needed. Soon our dining table, the same table Robert sanded and stained by hand, was covered in containers from a trendy new place downtown. Jasmine arranged the food like she was setting up a photo shoot. Eric was scrolling on his phone, barely noticing. Dinner felt strangely quiet. The kids were distracted, Jasmine kept glancing at her phone, and Eric made a comment about how old houses always trap smells. I smiled politely, but inside something pinched. After they left, I began tidying up. On instinct, I checked my phone. Jasmine had posted a photo. The caption read, "First family dinner at our place. Making new memories." In the picture, she and Eric were smiling with the kids, standing right in my kitchen, with my cabinets behind them. But the frame was cropped close, so tightly that only the edge of my shoulder appeared. If you didn't look closely, you'd think it was their home, not mine. I stared at that photo for a long time. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't loud. But it felt like a tiny tear at the edge of something important, the kind of tear that grows when no one notices or cares enough to mend it. Small erasures. That's how it started. It was a quiet morning when I first noticed something was wrong. I was sitting at the kitchen table, paying my usual bills, electricity, water, the small online order I had made for yarn. My notebook was open, the same one I'd used for decades to track every expense. It kept me grounded, especially after Robert passed. But when I opened my banking app, a new withdrawal caught my eye. A loan payment, large. Much larger than anything I recognized. At first, I thought I had clicked the wrong tab. I refreshed twice, thinking it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. But no, there it was. A repeating, automatic debit tied to a new mortgage. My heart thudded. I whispered to myself, "What is this?" Another payment had gone out the month before. I hadn't noticed it then. Grief fog does strange things to your attention. I called Eric. He answered on the fourth ring, sounding distracted. "Oh, that's just the refinance," he said casually. "It's temporary, Mom. Once my bonus hits, I'll funnel everything back. Don't worry about it." "But why is it coming out of my account?" I asked. He exhaled sharply, the way people do when they think you're being unreasonable. "Because your name is still on everything. The system pulls from the primary account holder. It's just how it works." I stared at the numbers on my screen, numbers that didn't belong in my life. Numbers that swallowed nearly half my monthly income. That month, I skipped buying my prescription refill and cut my grocery list in half. I didn't tell anyone. It felt embarrassing to say I couldn't afford my own life anymore. Looking back now, that was the moment I should have realized something had shifted, not just in the finances, but in my place within my own family. It was Cousin Lorraine who called me that Saturday afternoon. I remember because I was folding laundry, humming to myself, trying to fill the quiet in the house. "Did you have fun at the barbecue?" she asked. I paused, a towel still in my hands. "What barbecue?" There was a short silence on her end, the kind that tells you someone realized they've said the wrong thing. "Oh. I saw pictures. Looked like everyone was there." My chest tightened. As soon as we hung up, I opened social media. It didn't take long to find Jasmine's story. There they were, Eric, Jasmine, Hannah, Tyler, standing in a park full of balloons and picnic tables. Several cousins I hadn't seen since the funeral were smiling in the background. The caption read, "Family Day. Much needed. Family. But not me." I went back to the Scott family chat to see if I had missed something. I scrolled and scrolled, nothing. No mention of the barbecue at all. Not a single message. Later that evening, I called Eric. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I saw the photos. Why didn't anyone tell me?" He sounded surprised, almost annoyed. "Mom, you hate loud crowds. You always say that. We were thinking of you. Thinking of me." As if deciding for me was some kind of kindness. I hung up the phone and sat at the edge of the bed. A strange heaviness settled in my chest, not anger, not quite sadness. More like the slow realization that decisions were being made around me, without me. A quiet exclusion. A soft closing of a door I once walked through freely. The dizziness came out of nowhere. One moment I was watering the fern by the front steps, and the next the world tilted sideways. I grabbed the railing just in time, my knees buckling under me. For a few seconds, everything pulsed, the sky, the pavement, even my own breath. When the spinning eased, I sat down slowly on the porch, shaking. I told myself it was just low blood sugar. Stress. Grief. Anything but a sign that something inside me was failing. I didn't want to worry Eric, but when Jasmine heard about it, through one of her constant check-ins with the cousins, they showed up that evening. Jasmine walked in with a sense of urgency that felt theatrical, like she was stepping onto a stage. "Oh my God, Marilyn, this is exactly what we've been afraid of," she said, pressing the back of her hand to my forehead as if I were a child. "I'm fine," I insisted. It was a moment. That's all. But she exchanged a look with Eric, a look that carried a whole conversation. The kind that says, "See? This proves our point." Eric exhaled loudly. "Mom, this house is too much for you. 2 stories, old stairs, uneven floors, it's a lot for someone your age." The word stung, not because of the age comment, but because of the certainty in his voice, as if the house I had maintained for decades had suddenly become a dangerous jungle. Jasmine added softly, "We're just thinking of your safety. Those assisted living places have nurses, alarms, everything." I nodded, but inside, something tightened. My stumble had become their evidence. My body's moment of weakness had become their argument for control. And I didn't realize then how quickly they would use it. A few days after the dizzy spell, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox. The return address was from a bank, not the one Robert and I had used for years, but a different one entirely. I almost tossed it aside, assuming it was another credit card offer, but something about the weight of it made me pause. Inside were statements. Pages and pages of them. At the top of the first page, I saw words that made my heart skip: mortgage account, updated balance. The number printed there was enormous. Far larger than anything that had ever been owed on my home. I blinked hard, thinking maybe it was a mistake. But then I saw my own name listed as a co-borrower, alongside Eric and Jasmine. My throat tightened. I whispered, "No, no, this can't be right." I flipped through the pages, my hands trembling. The loan terms were nothing like the modest mortgage Robert and I once had. This was a cash-out refinance, something that involved new money going somewhere, but not to me. Under the disbursements section, I saw multiple line items that made my stomach twist: paid credit cards, transferred balances, settlement of debts I'd never heard of. None of them were mine. My first instinct was to call Eric, but I hesitated. The thought crept in, what if he already knows? What if this was the plan? When I finally reached him, his tone was dismissive, almost bored. "Mom, relax. It's all part of the refinance. It needed to be done. You wouldn't understand the details." He said it like it was nothing. But as I hung up the phone and stared at those papers spread across my kitchen table, I knew something terrible. My home, my safety, had been used without my understanding. And maybe without my true consent. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. That maybe the refinance mess was just poor communication. That maybe Eric really believed he was helping. But my hands kept shaking every time I looked at those statements. So, a few days later, I called him again. "Eric," I said gently, "I need you to come over so we can talk about the loan. There's a lot I don't understand." He sighed, that heavy, irritated kind of sigh meant to end a conversation before it began. "Mom, I already explained it. It's complicated. You shouldn't stress yourself over the details." "I'm not trying to stress," I said quietly. I need to know what I signed." There was a pause. Then his voice turned cold, edged with something I had never heard from him before. "If you're going to make everything difficult," he said, "maybe we need some space." The words knocked the breath out of me. "Space?" "Eric, I just want clarity," Jasmine's voice suddenly chimed in from the background. I could hear the annoyance in every syllable. "The kids don't need this negativity," she said. "If this is how things are going to be, maybe visits should slow down." My heart dropped. Hannah and Tyler were the only bright spots left in my days. The thought of losing time with them made my chest tighten. Eric must have heard the fear in my silence because he added, "Look, we're trying to help you. But if you keep overthinking everything, we'll have to protect the kids from the stress." Protect them. From me. I hung up the phone with my hand trembling so badly I had to steady it against the counter. That was the moment I understood something painful and undeniable. My relationship with my grandchildren had become a bargaining chip. A tool. Leverage. And if I wasn't careful, they would take that from me too. It happened on a Sunday morning. Quiet. Still. One of those mornings where the light feels soft, and you almost believe the world hasn't changed. I was sitting on the couch with my tea, trying to calm the heaviness in my chest after days of tension with Eric. I opened my messages, hoping foolishly for a picture from Hannah, or even a simple good morning. Instead, I saw a notification from cousin Lorraine. Just one message. A screenshot. At first, it looked like any group chat, profile icons, colored speech bubbles. But then my eyes caught the title at the top, Scott Family, New. There were messages. So many messages. All from people I loved. Jasmine, she's slowing everything down. We need to move forward. A cousin I'd held as a newborn, is she fighting you on the house? Another message from Jasmine, block her. She's not one of us anymore. And the worst part, right beneath it, a small red heart reaction from Eric. My son. My only child. I stared until the words blurred. My fingers went numb. The room felt colder, almost unfamiliar. I scrolled up and saw lines that made my stomach twist. We need that house free. She'll get confused eventually. Once we get power of attorney, this gets easier. Power of attorney? Free the house? Not one of us? I clutched my robe tighter around me, suddenly aware of how small I felt in my own living room, a living room filled with decades of family photos, memories, laughter. I whispered, Eric, why? But the truth sat there on my phone like a verdict. They had already removed me. Already planned around me. Already erased me. And I realized, with a sharp, painful clarity, my world hadn't just cracked. It had collapsed. That night after seeing the blocker message, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with every light on, papers spread out like a map of my own confusion, bank letters, refinance forms, screenshots from the group chat. The house was silent, but inside my chest everything was loud. A part of me wanted to call Eric and beg him to explain. To tell me it was a misunderstanding. To fix it, the way he used to fix things when he was a boy. But another part of me, a quieter part I'd nearly forgotten, whispered, go find the truth yourself. The next morning, I pressed that whisper into action. I dressed slowly, grabbed the thick envelope of bank statements, and drove to the branch listed on the letter, the new bank, the one Robert and I had never used. My hands trembled the whole way there, not from age, but from fear. Fear of what I might hear. Fear of confirming the betrayal. Inside, the waiting area smelled like cold air and toner. A young man at the counter directed me to an office where a calm, older bank officer introduced himself as Mr. Alden Price. What can I help you with today, Mrs. Scott? He asked kindly. I slid the papers toward him. I don't understand any of this. Could you explain what was done here? He adjusted his glasses and read in silence for several minutes. I watched his expression change, first neutral, then puzzled, then concerned. Mrs. Scott, he said gently, these documents show you're a co-borrower on a cash-out refinance. But based on the signatures and the timing, I'm not sure you were properly informed of the terms. My breath caught. He went on, carefully, no one can force you out of your home. And these loan changes, they raise some serious questions. A warmth spread through me, not comfort, but something sturdier, the first flicker of control. A small win. A small light. But enough to steady my shaking hands. The truth wasn't against me anymore. It was beginning to stand with me. When I came home from the bank, I didn't turn on the television or make tea or try to distract myself. I walked straight to the dining table, spread every document out again, and sat down with a new kind of focus. Not fear. Not confusion. Something sharper. Something awake. For years, I had let Eric handle anything with numbers because it made him feel capable. I thought I was being supportive. Now I saw how that trust had been twisted into something else. Cousin Lorraine texted me again that evening. I have more screenshots, if you want them. My hands hesitated over the keyboard. I didn't want more pain. But I needed truth. So I wrote back, send them. They came in one by one. Jasmine, she signs anything if you act stressed. Just push a little. Another cousin, she won't know. She barely checks her accounts. And then the one that made my chest tighten, she's basically the walking will. I stared at that line until my eyes blurred. Not a mother. Not a grandmother. A walking will. I took a trembling breath and did something I had never done before. I learned how to screenshot. It took me 3 tries, But once I figured it out, I saved every piece of evidence, the group chat messages, the refinance letters, the bank officer's business card. I printed each one and placed them carefully into a folder I labeled House. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed protection. As I slid the folder into the drawer beneath the old silverware tray, I felt something settle inside me, a quiet promise to myself. If they were building a case against me, I would build the truth right back. And this time, I wouldn't sign anything blindly. By the next morning, the folder labeled House felt heavier than it should have. Not from the papers, but from the truth inside it, truth I didn't want, but needed to face. Mr. Alden Price's concerned expression replayed in my mind over and over. You may not have been properly informed. Those words pushed me into the car and down to the small brick office with a blue sign that said Pierce and Associates, Elder Law and Estates. Inside, everything smelled faintly of lemon polish. A receptionist offered me water, but my throat was too tight to swallow. A few minutes later, a tall, calm-looking man with gray at his temples stepped into the waiting area. Mrs. Scott, he asked gently. I'm Jonathan Pierce. Please come in. His office wasn't intimidating, soft lamplight, framed family photos, a bookshelf of worn legal volumes. Still, my voice shook as I explained everything. The refinance papers, the new loan, the private group chat, the comments about power of attorney, the threats about the grandchildren. At first, I felt foolish for rambling, but he didn't interrupt. He didn't rush me. He listened. When I finally placed the folder on his desk, he opened it and skimmed through the documents with practiced eyes. His jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, but in recognition. Mrs. Scott, he said, folding his hands, what you're describing is a classic pattern of financial manipulation. Potential exploitation. And you are not powerless here. I swallowed hard. I don't want to hurt my son. Jonathan nodded. And that's why people like him rely on your silence. The room felt unbearably still. Then he said something that steadied my entire body. You have rights. And we're going to protect them. For the first time in months, I felt the ground beneath me stop shifting. I wasn't alone anymore. One of Jonathan's first questions surprised me more than any legal term or document. Mrs. Scott, he said gently, has anyone tried to suggest you're slipping? Forgetful? Unsafe on your own? My stomach sank. The dizzy spell. Jasmine's theatrics. Eric's comments. It's come up, I whispered. He nodded knowingly. Then I recommend you schedule a cognitive evaluation. It protects you. It prevents anyone from claiming you're incompetent. The word incompetent hit me like a slap. I had spent my whole life remembering details, bills, birthdays, medication schedules, school events. But grief fog was real, and age wasn't gentle. What if they were right? What if the test proved it? Driving to the neurologist's office, my palms were so sweaty I had to wipe them on my skirt. The waiting room was quiet except for the soft hum of a fish tank. I felt like a child taking an exam she wasn't prepared for. Dr. Nina Kowalski greeted me with a warm smile. We're just going to talk and do a few simple exercises, she said. Nothing to fear. But I was afraid. Terrified, actually. I repeated sequences of numbers. Pattern blocks. Memory questions. Orientation tests. Little tasks that suddenly felt enormous. When it ended, I sat there clutching my purse, bracing for humiliation. Dr. Kowalski set down her clipboard gently. Mrs. Scott, she said, your results are normal. More than normal. You are clear, coherent, and fully capable of managing your affairs. A breath I didn't realize I'd been holding escaped my body. Not confused. Not incompetent. Not slipping. Capable. That one word rebuilt something inside me, something Eric had tried to erode. Another small win. Another piece of myself returning. When I got home from the neurologist's office, I felt different. Not triumphant, not bold, just steadier. As if someone had turned on a light inside a room I had been stumbling through in the dark. Jonathan's next question echoed in my mind. Do you have a copy of your husband's will? I thought I did, the old one Robert and I had drafted years ago. But something tugged at me, a faint memory of him standing in our bedroom closet a few months before he passed, sliding a metal tin back onto the shelf. He had said, "Everything you need is in here, Marilyn." I hadn't asked what he meant. I wish I had. I pulled a chair over to the closet now and reached for that tin. Dust clung to the lid. Inside were old photos, a watch Robert's father had given him, our first mortgage papers, and a sealed envelope with my name written in Robert's handwriting. My breath caught. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it carefully, afraid the paper would crumble. Inside was a new will. Updated. Signed. Notarized. My eyes scanned the lines, and with each one, my pulse quickened. Robert had given me a life estate, the legal right to live in the house for the rest of my life, untouchable by anyone. After I passed, the home would go into a trust for Hannah and Tyler, bypassing Eric and Jasmine entirely. A laugh, part disbelief, part relief, part heartbreak, escaped my throat. Robert had known. He had seen something coming. He had protected me quietly, in the way he always did. And suddenly, the house didn't feel like something they could take anymore. It felt like something I was meant to defend. I brought the newly discovered will to Jonathan the next morning. He read it twice, his brow tightening with each line, then looked up at me with something that almost resembled relief. "Mrs. Scott," he said, "this changes everything. They can't remove you. They can't sell the house. They can't even pressure you legally. Your husband protected you more thoroughly than they realized." For the first time since Robert's funeral, I felt grounded. But Jonathan wasn't smiling. "Don't confront them yet," he warned. "If they sense you know more than they think, they'll escalate. Let them talk. Document everything." It went against every instinct I had. I wanted to shout. Demand answers. Ask Eric why. Ask Jasmine how she could treat me this way. But I trusted Jonathan. So, when Eric texted later asking if they could stop by to discuss options, I replied, "Of course. I'll make coffee." Before they arrived, I placed my phone in my apron pocket and tapped the little red recording button Jonathan had taught me to use. My hands shook, but I kept them steady long enough to start it. When they came in, Eric went straight to the point. "Mom, we need to make decisions. The house won't maintain itself forever. It'd be easier if you signed the transfer permissions." Jasmine crossed her arms. "We're trying to help you. But you dragging your feet makes it look like you don't trust us." Her tone wasn't worried. It was irritated. As if I was the one misbehaving. I listened quietly, asking small questions, letting them talk themselves into corners. They didn't know I was gathering their own words, their own intentions, in a small digital file resting against my hip. When they left, satisfied they had reasoned with me, I turned off the recording. Jonathan was right. Sometimes the strongest move isn't fighting back. It's letting someone reveal who they truly are, in their own voice. 2 days after our talk, Eric came by again, this time without Jasmine. He didn't knock. He let himself in with the spare key I had given him years ago, back when trust felt simple. He walked into the kitchen holding another stack of papers, his face tight with impatience. "Mom, we need to wrap this up," he said. "I brought the form you need to sign so we can move the process forward. It's just an insurance update. Nothing big. Nothing big." That phrase again, always floating above something enormous. He sat across from me and slid the document over with a pen placed neatly on top. I didn't touch either. I just looked at him, the son I had raised, the boy who once cried over losing a toy truck, now looking at me like I was an obstacle. "What does this do exactly?" I asked. Eric's jaw tightened. "Mom, you're overthinking. It's a small authorization so I can handle things on your behalf. You don't need to worry." My hand moved toward the pen out of old habit, the habit of trusting him. The habit of avoiding conflict. The habit of believing a child wouldn't harm the parent who raised him. But then, like a quiet voice rising inside me, I heard Jonathan's words, "Don't sign anything. Not one page. Not one line. My fingers hovered over the pen, then curled into a fist instead. I slid the paper back toward him. Slowly. Calmly. I will not sign anything until my attorney reviews it. Eric's eyes widened with anger, not shock, not confusion, but anger. Your attorney, he spat. Mom, what are you doing? I felt my heart beat steady. For the first time, truly steady. I'm protecting myself, I said. A simple sentence. A small win. But in that moment, it felt like a door slamming shut in his plans, and opening in mine. I should have expected their next move, but I didn't. I truly believed that refusing to sign that paper would slow them down, maybe even force them to reconsider. But manipulators don't reconsider. They escalate. It happened 3 days later. I was in the garden trimming the small rosebush Robert planted the year Hannah was born when a white envelope appeared in my mailbox. Thick. Official looking. Cold. A court notice. My hands shook as I carried it inside. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had once served pancakes to a little boy named Eric, and opened it with trembling fingers. The first words nearly stopped my heart. Petition for temporary guardianship. Guardianship. Over me. Eric and Jasmine had filed a claim stating I was unable to manage my daily affairs. That I was confused, forgetful, unsafe living alone, and prone to making irrational decisions that endangered the well-being of family members, particularly minor grandchildren. They used Tyler. My sweet, gentle Tyler. As leverage in a legal document. And at the bottom, signed in digital ink, were their names. For a moment, everything inside me collapsed. My vision blurred. My ears rang. Guardianship meant control, complete control. Over my home. My finances. My freedom. It was the legal equivalent of taking my life out of my own hands. I called Jonathan immediately. He answered on the first ring. Bring the notice, he said. And bring the evaluation from Dr. Kowalski. This is exactly why we prepared. The hearing was scheduled fast, faster than it should have been, like someone had pushed it through. And standing in that courtroom, listening to my own son describe me as if I were a helpless, crumbling stranger. I felt something inside me shift permanently. But when Jonathan stood, calmly laid out the medical evaluation, the bank irregularities, and the recording I had made, a hush fell over the room. The judge leaned back, her eyes narrowing at Eric. And in that moment, the momentum changed. Not fully. Not finally. But unmistakably. The trap they set for me had snapped back, right into their hands. News travels fast in small communities, faster than truth, faster than lies, faster than intention. By the next Sunday, before I even stepped into the church foyer, I knew the guardianship petition had spread like a cold breeze through the congregation. People didn't say anything out loud. They just looked at me a little too long. Soft eyes. Tilted heads. Quiet pity. I hated it. Pastor Helen stood near the front doors greeting people, her warm smile dimmer than usual. When she saw me approaching, she opened her arms gently. Marilyn, how are you holding up? Her tone wasn't casual. It was cautious, the way someone asks when they already know something is wrong. I swallowed tightly. Trying, I whispered. She guided me to a quieter corner near the bulletin board. Eric came by the office, she said softly. He told me he's worried about you. Said he's doing what any loving son would do. A hollow ache spread in my chest. Of course he had gone to her. Of course he framed himself as the devoted child. I opened my purse and took out the folder labeled House, pulling only one page free, the screenshot of the private group chat, the one where Jasmine wrote, block her. She's not one of us anymore. I didn't say a word. I just placed it into Pastor Helen's hands. She read it slowly. Her brow furrowed. Her mouth tightened. When she finally looked up, the pity in her eyes was gone, replaced by something far sharper. Something protective. Marilyn, she said quietly, this is not a son acting out of love." Her words didn't fix anything. But they did something else, something I hadn't expected. They took away the power of Eric's lies. And for the first time, he wasn't the only one telling the story anymore. The morning after speaking with Pastor Helen, I woke up with a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity, like my body was tired, but my mind had finally stopped running in circles. I sat at the kitchen table, the folder labeled house beside my cup of tea, and made a decision: no more waiting for Eric's next move. This time, I would move first. I drove straight to Jonathan's office without an appointment. When he saw me standing in the doorway, he didn't ask a single question. He simply gestured to the chair across from his desk. "I'm ready," I said. "Whatever we need to do to protect my home, I want to do it now." Jonathan nodded, a small flicker of approval crossing his face. "We'll start by limiting their access. Step by step." And step by step, we did. First, he helped me place a freeze on any new loans connected to my property. With that freeze, not a single bank or lender could approve anything without my direct, verified consent. Next, we revoked every power of attorney document I had ever signed, even the harmless ones from years ago, and filed the revocation with the county clerk. Then came my will. Jonathan drafted a new one that aligned with Robert's updated version, honoring the life estate and protecting the trust for Hannah and Tyler. "Your son won't have authority over your estate," Jonathan said gently. "Not now, not later." When it was all done, I expected to feel relief. Instead, I felt something firmer, a sense of ownership returning to my body. That afternoon, Eric tried to access one of my accounts and couldn't. He called 3 times, then texted, "Mom? What did you do?" I didn't answer. For the first time in a long time, I didn't owe him an explanation. By midweek, the ripples from the guardianship hearing reached the extended family. It started with a single text from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in months. "Is everything okay? I'm hearing things, hearing things." That phrase told me exactly what Eric and Jasmine were doing. It didn't take long before the group chats, the real ones, the ones I had been quietly replaced in, burst into their own storm of divided opinions. I wasn't in those chats, of course. But family members talk. And some still cared enough to tell the truth. One cousin forwarded a message from Eric: "Mom is confused. We're trying to help her. She's being influenced by outsiders." By outsiders, he meant Jonathan. He meant anyone who didn't fall in line. Another forwarded something from Jasmine: "We're doing everything to protect the kids. Marilyn just isn't stable right now." Stable. As if I was spiraling into madness. As if grief had emptied me of all reason. But something unexpected happened. Not everyone believed them. Cousin Lorraine texted me privately again: "You don't have to say anything. I'll speak at the hearing if needed." Another cousin wrote: "We know you've always supported Eric. This doesn't sound like you, it sounds like them." I didn't try to convince anyone. I didn't defend myself in long messages or emotional phone calls. I had learned enough to know that shouting the truth does less than simply showing it. Before leaving all group chats completely, I sent one final message, short, calm, and deliberate: "Thank you for revealing where everyone stands. I will let the courts handle the rest. Please do not contact me unless it is respectful." Then I hit leave group. A strange silence followed. Sad. Heavy. But freeing, too. Because in that moment, the lines were drawn, not by drama, but by truth. And I finally chose to stand on my side of them. When manipulators lose access, they don't apologize. They retaliate. It started the same evening I left the family group chats. My phone buzzed with notifications from neighbors, church acquaintances, even an old coworker I hadn't spoken to in years. "Are you okay? Saw something online, not sure what's going on. Let me know if you need anything." Confused, I opened social media. There it was. A long, polished post on Jasmine's page with a soft-filtered family photo, her, Eric, Hannah, and Tyler, all smiling as if their lives were untouched by deceit. Her caption read, Sometimes loving someone means making the hard decisions for them, even when they don't understand. Please pray for us as we deal with Maryland's health and safety challenges. We're trying our best. My mouth went dry. Health and safety challenges? My health? My safety? Dozens of comments flooded in. You're such good children. She's lucky to have you. Stay strong. Elder care is hard. The lies tangled themselves into a neat little narrative. And I could see exactly what they were doing. They were building a version of the story where they were the heroes, and I was the burden. My first instinct was to defend myself, to type out a long explanation, to correct every false detail. But Jonathan's words echoed in my mind. Let them talk. Their story will contradict itself. Yours won't. So instead of responding, I quietly saved everything. Screenshots of the post. The comments. The timestamps. Not as proof to the world, but as evidence for the courtroom. Because lies can only stretch so far before they snap. And I had already begun collecting every strand. By the time I walked into Jonathan's office again, the folder labeled house was thicker, heavier, and far more complete. I placed it on his desk without a word. He opened it, scanned the screenshots from Jasmine's post, and exhaled slowly through his nose. Exactly as expected, he said. They're crafting a narrative. But they've made a mistake. I leaned forward. What mistake? He tapped the printed post with his pen. They're claiming you're mentally unfit. Publicly. While we have a recent medical evaluation proving the opposite. Courts don't look kindly on people who weaponize false claims. Then he pulled out a fresh set of documents, this time, ones I would benefit from. Mrs. Scott, it's time we take formal action. The plan was simple, but powerful. First, Jonathan drafted a formal complaint for elder financial exploitation, citing the refinance irregularities, the abrupt loan changes, and the pattern of coercion. Once this is filed, he explained, the court can investigate where every dollar went. Then he prepared a request for the bank's internal audit. Banks don't like liability. When they sense misconduct, they move quickly to avoid trouble. Mr. Alden Price had already flagged concerns. Now the bank would review the refinance step by step. And if they determine Eric and Jasmine misrepresented anything, Jonathan said, the responsibility for the debt shifts to them, not you. My breath caught. They would owe it? Yes, he said firmly. Every cent that was improperly taken. The weight of that hit me slowly. Not as revenge. But as justice, finally turning toward me. Jonathan gathered the documents into a neat pile and looked me in the eye. Are you ready to move forward? I nodded. Not with fear. Not with hesitation. But with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was time for the truth to be examined, not whispered. The guardian petition had shaken me, but the next court notice felt different. It felt like a summons to the truth. Jonathan called early one morning. The judge has consolidated the issues, he said. Both the guardianship petition and the initial evidence of financial exploitation will be reviewed in a combined hearing. Combined. Meaning everything would be laid bare in one room, their accusations, my evidence, every lie, every contradiction. A cold shiver ran through me. Will people be there? I asked. Yes, Jonathan replied. The court has issued subpoenas. He read off the names slowly, each one landing like a small drumbeat. Mr. Alden Price. My breath steadied. The bank officer who had seen through the irregularities. Cousin Lorraine. The one who had forwarded the truth when no one else would. And Pastor Helen Moore. A trusted voice in the community, and someone Eric respected. One by one, the witnesses formed a circle stronger than any story Eric and Jasmine were trying to tell. Jonathan continued, this hearing isn't just about your capacity, Mrs. Scott. It's about intent. Patterns. Behavior. We're going to show the court who has been acting in bad faith. I nodded, but my hands shook anyway. Being right didn't erase the fear of facing your own child in a courtroom, hearing him speak cold words against you. That night, I walked through the house with slow steps, touching the doorway where Robert's height marks still faintly showed, brushing my fingers across framed photos, feeling the soft indent of the couch where the grandkids used to curl beside me. Would this be the last week I lived here freely? Or the first step toward reclaiming what was mine? The hearing date circled on my calendar like an approaching storm. Not one I could avoid. One I would have to walk straight into. But this time, I wouldn't be walking alone. The knock on my door that evening wasn't polite. It rattled the frame, sharp, impatient, unmistakably Eric. I opened it slowly. He stood on the porch with his shoulders tight, his jaw locked, his eyes flicking past me as if checking whether anyone else was inside. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, pushing past me before I even stepped aside. He moved into the living room like he still owned the place. Like the house was already his, and I was just a temporary guest. I closed the door gently and stood a few feet away, refusing to shrink the way I once might have. "What is it, Eric?" I asked. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Why are you making this so hard? Freezing accounts? Lawyers? Subpoenas? You're blowing everything up." I kept my voice steady. "I'm protecting myself." He let out a bitter laugh. "Protecting yourself from me? Your own son? After everything I've done for you?" I almost corrected him, almost reminded him of the loan he drained, the decisions he made behind my back, but Jonathan's advice echoed in my mind, let their own words reveal their intentions. Don't argue. Don't feed their narrative. So I stayed quiet. Eric stepped closer. Now Pastor Helen is looking at me like I'm some kind of criminal. The family is talking. You've humiliated us. Us. Not me. Not him. Us, the image he and Jasmine crafted so carefully. "Eric," I said softly, "you did that on your own." His face twisted with anger. "If I go down, you're coming with me. You hear me?" But the threat landed differently this time. Not like a blow, like a confession. I met his eyes, unflinching. "The truth is coming out, Eric. All of it." For a moment, something flickered in his expression, fear, not fury. Then he stormed out, the slammed door echoing through the quiet house he once assumed he'd inherit. And I realized something with chilling clarity: he wasn't fighting for me. He was fighting for what he thought he was about to lose. The night before the hearing, the house felt heavier than it ever had. Not noisy. Not chaotic. Just heavy, like the walls themselves were waiting to see what would happen next. I moved slowly through each room, touching the things that held pieces of my life. The photo of Robert in his Sunday suit. The small ceramic turtle Hannah made for me in second grade. Tyler's crayon drawing still taped crookedly to the refrigerator. Every memory felt fragile, as if it could slip away if I didn't hold it gently. Would I still wake up in this home tomorrow? Would a judge believe the truth? Would Eric push harder if things didn't go his way? The questions circled like birds over open water, relentless, silent, inescapable. I walked into the bedroom and opened the drawer where I kept Robert's old keys. The metal felt cool and familiar in my hand, reminding me of his steady presence. I tucked them into my purse along with Jonathan's carefully organized evidence, Dr. Kowalski's evaluation, the bank statements, the screenshots, the recorded conversation, and Robert's updated will, all neatly arranged, all quietly powerful. For a moment, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the hallway light spilling across the floor. My body trembled, not from age, not from weakness, but from the weight of the unknown. I whispered a small, shaky prayer, not for victory, but for truth. Outside, a soft wind brushed the windows. The house creaked the way old houses do at night, a familiar, comforting sound. I lay down, fully dressed, unable to imagine sleep. Tomorrow would decide everything. My home. My freedom. My future. And as the clock ticked past midnight, one thought rose above all others: if they wanted a fight for this house, they were finally about to get one. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and cold air, the kind of place where time doesn't move, it waits. Jonathan walked beside me, a steady presence, while I clutched my purse tight against my chest. Inside it, every document I had gathered felt like armor. When we stepped into the courtroom, a soft murmur rippled through the small crowd. I recognized faces, cousins, church members, neighbors who had watched Eric grow up. They weren't here for drama. They were here because whispers had turned into questions, and questions had turned into concern. Eric and Jasmine sat at the opposite table. Eric in a pressed suit, jaw tight. Jasmine with her hair perfectly curled, hands folded as if in prayer. They looked polished. Prepared. Confident. But there was something brittle at the edges, a stiffness in Eric's shoulders, a forced calm in Jasmine's smile. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. She had clear, steady eyes, the kind that could slice through excuses. After a few procedural words, she looked between the two tables. We are here to address both the guardianship petition and preliminary issues related to alleged financial exploitation. Hearing those words aloud, exploitation, made my heart thud. Not in fear. In recognition. Jonathan stood first. Your Honor, Mrs. Scott has complied with every request, provided complete documentation, and is prepared to present her medical evaluation and recorded evidence. I watched Eric's jaw clench. Jasmine's fingers tightened around her notebook. The judge nodded. Very well. We'll begin with opening statements. Mr. Scott? Eric rose, smoothing his suit jacket. He glanced at me, not with love, not even with guilt, but with calculation. And as he opened his mouth to speak, I realized this was no longer a private wound. This was the day every mask would start to crack. Eric began his statement with a rehearsed, trembling voice, the kind meant to stir sympathy. Your Honor, he said, my mother has been struggling. She forgets things. She gets confused easily. She nearly fell down the stairs last month. We're simply trying to keep her safe. He placed a hand on his chest, eyes glistening with manufactured emotion. And we're doing this as a family. Out of love. Jasmine nodded solemnly beside him, lowering her gaze like a grieving saint. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed them myself. But Jonathan was already on his feet. Your Honor, we have evidence that directly contradicts Mr. Scott's claims. The judge gestured for him to continue. Jonathan pulled out a thin file, one I knew very well, and approached the bench. First, he said calmly, the medical evaluation. He handed over Dr. Kowalski's report. Competent. Coherent. Fully capable. Every word a stone landing squarely on their fabricated narrative. Eric swallowed hard. Second, Jonathan continued, a recording. He pressed play on the small device. Eric's voice came through first, low and impatient. We need this handled before she starts asking questions. There was a pause, the faint sound of movement. If the court signs off, everything gets simpler. Then Jasmine's voice followed, lighter, but sharp underneath. Don't overwhelm her. Just present it like it's urgent, and she'll sign. Gasps rippled through the room. Even the judge's expression shifted, controlled, but unmistakably sharper. Mr. Scott, she said, turning to Eric, you stated this petition was motivated by your mother's well-being. Yet this recording suggests a different intent. Eric stammered, that's out of context. Jonathan stepped forward again. Your Honor, there is more. He placed the printed group chat screenshot on the evidence table. Block her. She's not one of us anymore. Silence swept through the courtroom like a cold wind. Jasmine's face drained of color. Eric looked down at the floor. And just like that, the guardianship petition, their strongest weapon, crumbled in full view of everyone. The judge closed the folder decisively. Petition denied. Those two words felt like the first crack of dawn after a very long night. If the guardianship petition cracking open was the first blow, what came next was the full fracture, the truth laid out piece by piece until their story couldn't hold its shape anymore. Jonathan rose again, this time with a thicker folder. Your Honor, we now turn to the financial concerns. Eric visibly stiffened. Jasmine's hand flew to her purse, gripping it so tightly her knuckles blanched. Jonathan called the first witness. Mr. Alden Price. The bank officer stepped forward, calm and professional. He took the oath and sat down, adjusting his glasses as Jonathan began. Mr. Price, could you explain what you found regarding Mrs. Scott's refinance? Mr. Price spoke with the steady neutrality of someone who deals in numbers, not excuses. The refinance was initiated primarily by Mr. Scott and his wife, he said. Mrs. Scott signed documents, yes, but the context of those signatures raises concerns. The loan terms were not clearly explained to her based on available records. He paused, glancing at the judge. And the funds dispersed from the cash-out refinance, none of them went to Mrs. Scott. They were directed toward covering Mr. Scott's personal credit card debt and several accounts belonging to his household. A ripple of murmurs passed through the courtroom. Jonathan leaned in. To be clear, did Mrs. Scott benefit from this refinance in any way? No, Mr. Price replied firmly. Not financially. Jasmine shifted, her face tightening. Jonathan then introduced the second round of evidence, bank statements showing withdrawals from my account, automatic payments tied to debts I never created, and documentation of signatures placed electronically by Eric. The judge examined each page slowly, her expression hardening. Mr. Scott, she said finally, looking directly at him, your explanations will be required, but at this moment, I see a concerning pattern. Eric's mouth opened, but no words came out. And for the first time, I saw it clearly, they weren't just losing control. They were losing the story they wrote about me, and now the truth was writing itself. The judge took her time reviewing the pages Jonathan had laid before her, the refinance statements, the withdrawal records, the loan breakdown, the signatures lined up like quiet witnesses. Each page she turned felt like a piece of my life finally being seen. When she finished, she placed the stack down with deliberate care and looked toward Jonathan. Is there anything further? Yes, Your Honor, he replied. One final exhibit. He reached into the folder and pulled out a single printed sheet, the screenshot that had found its way to me through Cousin Lorraine. He turned it toward the judge. Her eyes scanned it. Then she read the lines aloud, her voice steady but edged with disbelief. Block her. She's not one of us anymore. Once we get the house, this will be easier. She'll sign anything if you push. The words echoed through the courtroom like a dropped stone in a silent lake. A gasp came from somewhere behind me. I didn't turn to see who it was, I couldn't. My eyes were fixed on the judge's face as she lifted the page closer, as if trying to understand how a family could speak like this. Jasmine pressed her hands over her mouth, eyes wide. Eric sat rigid, his jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitching from across the room. Jonathan spoke softly, letting the moment breathe. Your Honor, this is not the language of caregiving. This is the language of coercion. The judge's gaze sharpened. Mr. Scott, Mrs. Scott, do either of you wish to dispute the authenticity of this message? Jasmine shook her head almost imperceptibly. Eric opened his mouth, then closed it again. Silence. Heavy. Damning. And in that silence, something inside me finally loosened. For the first time, the world, not just me, saw who they really were. Not caretakers. Not protectors. But people who thought they could erase me quietly. And now, they stood exposed in front of everyone they hoped to impress. The judge took a long breath, the kind that fills a room with gravity before anything is spoken. She folded her hands, her expression sober, measured, but unmistakably firm. After reviewing the evidence, she began slowly, this court finds no credible basis for the guardianship petition. Eric flinched. Jasmine stared at the table, her face blotchy. The judge continued, her voice gaining strength. On the contrary, the petition appears not only unfounded, but potentially retaliatory in nature. Retaliatory. Hearing that word aloud was like a weight lifting off my chest. She turned her full attention to Eric. Mr. Scott, your claims of confusion and instability are contradicted by documented medical evaluations and your own recorded statements. Eric swallowed hard. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but inwardly, as though someone had punctured the balloon of authority he'd been floating on. The judge shifted her gaze to both Eric and Jasmine. Furthermore, evidence presented today raises serious concerns regarding financial misconduct, misrepresentation, and potential exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Jasmine's breath hitched, loud in the otherwise silent room. The court is ordering a formal investigation into the refinance transaction and all associated financial activity. Until that investigation is complete, neither of you is permitted to manage or influence Mrs. Scott's financial affairs in any capacity. Jonathan nodded beside me, his posture calm, almost relieved. The judge wasn't done. Additionally, Mrs. Scott will retain full rights to her home and daily decisions. No further petitions regarding her capacity will be considered without substantial, independent evidence. It felt like a door that had been slowly closing on me for months was suddenly kicked open. Eric stared at me then, not with love, not with apology, but with a kind of stunned disbelief, as though he was only just realizing the truth. He had lost control. Not because I fought loudly, but because the truth finally spoke louder than his lies. The week after the hearing felt strangely quiet, not peaceful, not yet, but steady. Like a storm had passed, and the air hadn't quite settled. Jonathan called me into his office once more, this time not with an emergency, but with something close to resolution. "Mrs. Scott," he said, laying out a clean stack of documents between us, "I have good news." I held my breath. "The court has confirmed your life estate in the property, per your husband's updated will." The words landed slowly, like warm drops of rain. Life estate. Not temporary. Not optional. Not something Eric or Jasmine could touch. "This means," Jonathan continued, "you cannot be removed from the home, not now, not ever. It is legally yours to live in for the remainder of your life." I exhaled shakily, my hands gripping the armrests of the chair. "And the trust for Hannah and Tyler?" I asked quietly. Jonathan nodded, sliding another document forward. "Established. Legally solid. Your husband drafted it well. The house will go directly into the grandchildren's trust once you pass." "So Eric." "He has no automatic claim," Jonathan said gently. "Not under this will. Not under any revised documents. Their involvement with the refinance may still result in consequences, but your rights are secured." A tear slipped down my cheek, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming feeling of being protected, finally, by the man who loved me, even after he was gone. As Jonathan packed up the folder, he said, "You should know something else." He paused, meeting my eyes. "The bank has flagged the refinance for irregularities. There's a strong possibility the responsibility for the remaining debt will fall solely on Eric and Jasmine." I closed my eyes, letting the words settle. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Just justice, aligning itself at last. And my home, the heart of my life, was safe. The Sunday after everything became public in court, I walked into church with my shoulders a little straighter. Not proud, not triumphant, just no longer carrying the weight of a lie that wasn't mine. People noticed. Not with stares this time, but with soft nods, small smiles, a gentle squeezing of my hand as I passed through the foyer. No one asked for details. They didn't need to. Truth has a way of settling itself into a room before you speak a word. I took my usual seat near the middle. A moment later, I saw them, Eric and Jasmine, standing awkwardly near the back, as if deciding whether to sit or leave. They hesitated long enough for heads to turn toward them. It wasn't dramatic. No one pointed fingers. But something unspoken shifted. Where people once approached them eagerly, offering sympathy, praise, support, now they approached cautiously, with polite nods instead of open warmth. A few avoided eye contact altogether. Others gave those tight smiles you offer someone whose story doesn't match what you've learned. Pastor Helen approached them with her Bible pressed to her chest. I watched from a distance. She listened as Eric spoke quickly, gesturing with his hands, trying to shape his version of events. Jasmine kept glancing around, as if searching for an ally. But when Pastor Helen responded, her posture changed, straightening, steadying. She spoke softly, but I could read her expression even from yards away. It wasn't condemnation. It was disappointment, deep and unmistakable. I looked down at my hands, folded neatly in my lap. This wasn't the justice of a courtroom. It was the quieter justice of truth settling into a community. And for the first time in months, the story wasn't theirs anymore. It belonged to the people who had finally seen the truth for themselves. A few days after the hearing, there was a soft knock on my door, the kind that didn't demand entry, just asked for it. When I opened it, Hannah and Tyler stood there, backpacks slung over their shoulders, looking smaller than I remembered. "Hi, Grandma," Hannah said, her voice quiet but steady. Tyler stepped forward and wrapped his arms around my waist before I even had time to kneel. I held him, feeling the damp warmth of his cheek against my sweater. When he pulled back, his lower lip trembled just a little. "Mom and Dad said we could come if we wanted," Hannah said. She looked older somehow, not in age, but in understanding. We wanted to." I nodded and stepped aside. "You are always welcome here." They walked in, glancing around like they were checking if anything had changed. Nothing had. I had kept everything exactly where it belonged, especially their drawings on the refrigerator. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one that had once held pancakes and homework and birthday candles. Hannah fiddled with the zipper of her backpack. "Grandma," she whispered, "I saw some of the messages in the group chat." I didn't know what to do. My heart cracked softly. She shouldn't have had to see any of it. I reached for her hand. "Sweetheart, nothing that happened is your fault." "Not any of it." Tyler leaned into my arm, his voice small. "Are you mad at Daddy?" I took a slow breath. "I'm not mad at either of you. And I don't want you to worry about grown-up things. But I do need one rule: when you're here, this home is peaceful. No arguing, no pressure. Just honesty and kindness." They both nodded. And in that moment, in the quiet acceptance on their faces, I realized something: I hadn't lost my family. I had simply found the part of it still capable of love. The garden had always been my refuge, long before any of this happened. Even when Robert was alive, I would slip outside with a cup of tea and lose myself in the simple rhythm of soil and sunlight. After the hearing, after the strain and the truth and the unraveling of everything I thought I understood, I found myself drawn back there again. The air was crisp that morning. A soft breeze carried the scent of the rosemary bush Robert planted years ago. I knelt beside the patch of earth near the fence where he once said he wanted just one more rosebush, a splash of color to fill the corner. I decided to plant it. As I pressed my hands into the soil, I felt the cool earth steady me. Each scoop of dirt felt like a small release, of fear, of anger, of the ache that had lived in my chest for months. The rosebush was small, delicate, its roots fragile but determined. I lowered it gently into place and patted the soil around it. I whispered, "This is for us, Robert. For what we built. For what we protected." The sunlight warmed my back. A bird chirped from somewhere above. Life, simple and steady, went on. I thought about Eric. Not with rage. Not even with heartbreak anymore. Just a quiet, tired understanding. I couldn't change him. I couldn't make him see me, or value me, or act from love instead of need. But I could let go of carrying the weight of his choices. Forgiveness, I realized, didn't mean welcoming him back. It didn't erase what he'd done. It simply meant loosening the grip of pain so I could breathe again. And in that garden, with dirt under my nails and sunlight on my shoulders, I finally exhaled. The house was quiet that evening, not empty, not lonely, just quiet in a way that felt earned. A kind of peace that didn't demand anything from me. I walked slowly through each room, my fingers trailing along the furniture Robert built, the photo frames filled with years of life, the small reminders of who I was before everything turned upside down. It felt different now. Not like a place I was trying desperately to hold on to, but a place I had fought for and won back. When I reached the front door, I paused and looked at the small wooden bowl on the entry table. Robert's old keys sat inside, the ones he rattled every evening when he came home from work, The same keys he once pressed into my hand and promised would always open our door. I lifted them, feeling the familiar weight. Not heavy with fear anymore, but with meaning. My phone buzzed gently. A message from Hannah: "Good night, Grandma, see you this weekend." A simple text. But to me, it felt like the future finally shifting in my direction again. I smiled, placed Robert's keys back into the bowl, and turned the lock from the inside. Not out of fear, but out of a sense of control I hadn't felt in a long time. Walking back toward the living room, I whispered into the soft hush of the house, "Family isn't who tries to claim you. Family is who shows up when the truth does." They had tried to remove me from the story, erase me quietly, rewrite the ending without me. But the truth had its own voice. And in the end, I reclaimed not just my home, but myself. With the house safe, my dignity restored, and my boundaries firm, I stepped into a new life, quieter, steadier, and entirely my own. If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it. If you have a unique story of your own, share it in the comments below. Thank you for listening.